Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Alderman Alder.
Here.
Alderman Flores.
Here.
Thank you. Alderman Galloway.
Here.
Alderman Hutchinson. Here. Alderman Elwin.
Here.
Alderman Snyder.
Here.
We have 6 aldermen. We have quorum.
Very good. At this time, we'll do the approval of the June 5th minutes. Y'all have had a chance to look at these. Any questions about them? If not, I would entertain a motion that would be accepted. Okay, Alderman Hutchinson and seconded by Alderman Alder. Okay, the motion that we approve the minutes as printed by Alderman Hutchinson, seconded by Alderman Alder. All deserve a show of hands. And yes, I see. Therefore, it passes. Looking at our next item 5 and 6, there's no ceremonial manners, there's no scheduled guests. So we'll go and start with the reading of, and of course, we do have Alder Flores. I have to keep reminding you, you're up there. We will to remind you and all when you want to talk. We're just making fun of you the way you're looking down at us, but we're glad you could join us by Zoom, though. That's the main thing. We're going to do the first reading of the bill and with bill number 3453.
Your Honor, I move that we place bill number 3453 on its first reading by title only.
Okay, and seconded by. Okay, I would do Alder. So bill number 3453 on the first reading, motion by Alderman Galloway, second by Alderman Alder. All in favor, do so by show of hands. And it passes. And then, yes.
An ordinance authorizing the city to enter into a master intergovernmental cooperative purchasing agreement to utilize the Omnia Partners Cooperative Procurement Program.
Okay, and city administrator.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, you may recall that previously in the year, we adopted an ordinance to be able to purchase items off of the state bid list. That is something that is very beneficial to us. That way, whenever we budget for items, we can move forward and order those items off of the state bid because they've already been through the process. Well, as we were going through our process to, remodel Brick Street and remodel some of the areas and move, we know we're going to have the need for the purchase of professional office spaces, office furniture. One of the things we found that on the state bid list was there aren't any professional office furniture options on the state bid list. So what we did was we found another cooperative purchasing agreement that we can utilize that is called Omnia. This is will allow us to be able to acquire the professional office equipment and furniture that we need. So works just like the state bid. It's just a different cooperative purchasing agreement.
Okay, thank you, sir. Questions from any of the aldermen? Okay, I am not seeing any movement. Is there anyone here to speak for this bill? Okay, anyone here to speak against this? Okay. Do anybody on Zoom besides Alderman Flores? Okay. Again, any questions from the board? Okay. I'm not seeing anything, so I would entertain a motion to. No. I'm sorry, what?
It'll be held over.
Yeah, you're right. I know I got ahead because it's first reading. So therefore, bill number 3453 will be held over to the future meeting. So. Okay. Move on now to bill 3454.
Make a motion to bill number 3454 by its first read by title.
Very good. And if, I'm sorry to hear what you said it. Oh, yeah, Alderman Snyder. So therefore, bill number 3454 for the first reading, made motion by Alderman Owen and a second by Alderman Snyder. All in favor, do so by show of hands. And yes,
An ordinance amending the zoning code and official map by changing the zoning classification of certain real property, generally known as a parcel approximately 0.91 acres at 5425 North Pheasant Road.
okay. And Director Kim Smith.
Yes, this property is approximately at the intersection of NN and Pheasant Road, just southeast of Waterford, to kind of give you that regional area. You may recall a few years ago, 3 parcels to the west of this parcel process at that time to rezone from commercial to residential. The request is to rezone approximately 0.92 general commercial to RSF1 single family. The current use of the parcel is single family resident, and the applicant is planning to remain the use or continue the use of single family. The lot is considered a legal non-conforming due to the commercial zoning that was placed several years ago on the residential property. The to the north is in that purple shaded area is PUD. That is the Waterford subdivision, and it has a single family and a commercial use in there. And then to the east, south, and west, it's all single family residential surrounding this parcel. There would be no overlay districts for the Indian corridor that would affect this property with the single family zoning. The comprehensive plan does note this as single family, and so that would conform to the comprehensive plan. The zoning is successful, it would bring this into a conforming use of this parcel. Staff did recommend approval as well as the P and Z Commission. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Alderman Hutchinson.
Just a quick thing I noted is that most of the application through here notes it as 0.91 acres, but then on the permit, it says 1.5 acres. I just wondered which was.
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know that I can give you the right answer at the moment, but yeah, it is the one parcel there at the southwest corner of the intersection.
That really doesn't make any difference.
It won't necessarily make any difference because we posted based on the public notice and the posting of the address.
I am not seeing any movement. Is there anyone here to speak for this bill number 3454? I'm sorry, sir. Did you finish? I didn't mean.
Yeah, I'm finished. I was trying to write a note. I didn't have your way.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rush it. Okay, so
I don't have anything to say. I'm just going, just so that you know.
oh, okay, thank you. So I see no one for. Is anyone here to speak against though the bill 3454? Okay, and I said there's no one on Zoom. I'm watching Alderman Flores. But I don't want to miss him if he has a comment. But so again from the board, any final comments? Okay, not seeing anything, then this bill will be held over 3454 for a future meeting. We'll now move on to bill number 3455.
Make a motion to bill 3455 on its first reading by title.
Okay. And okay, so bill number 3455, motion by Alderman Owen, is in second by Alderman Snyder. All in favor of discussion of this, do so by show of hands. And it passes.
An ordinance amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, section 405-350 C4 design guidelines.
Okay, and you might as well just stay up there. You can, almost all these bills are yours. Go ahead, Director Smith.
Yes, the revision to the C4 ordinance, a few minor revisions that staff had been catching and just making a list as we've been utilizing this ordinance. So it's really just a cleanup. On the first page of the ordinance, on item C, there was a reference to a 8-foot height of a fence. We have revised that to 6 feet just to coordinate with the general sections of screening, section 405-800. So it was a conflicting note that was in the ordinance. The next revision is at the end of the ordinance on the last, I think it's the second to last page, item number 9. Again, outside storage and screening requirements. We already note that in section 405-800. So we were just striking through that and removing that just because of it's a doubling up on the requirements or noting of the requirements. And then toward the end of that, we were removing all the reference to the lighting standards, just because now that we've adopted the dark sky ordinance, that would overwrite this. But that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Anyone? Okay, I'm just. Not seeing anyone? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone here to speak for bill number 355? Anyone opposed to bill number 345? Okay, not seeing anyone. Last chance from the board. Okay, not seeing a movement then, move that bill 355 will be held to a future meeting. We'll move on to item 4 now, which is bill number 3456.
Make a motion to place bill number 3456 on by first reading by title.
Okay. Alderman Snyder. So bill number 3456, motion by Alderman Owen and second by Alderman Snyder to go into discussion. All in favor, do so by show of hands. And it passes.
An ordinance amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 405 zoning regulations to add language regulating accessory dwelling unit conditional use permits.
Okay. Director Smith.
Yes, as you may recall, when the single family ordinance was adopted a few months ago for the RSF 1 and 2, there was a condition placed on there that staff is not to permit any accessory dwelling units until the conditions were in place. And so they do require a conditional use to be approved before they can be permitted. And so that is a public process. So what you see in front of you on page 6 and 7, staff is proposing those conditions for the accessory dwelling units. We noted the purpose as item number 1, and then following that, there's additional requirements such as location, height, the exterior building materials. They have to be built for an international residential building code, and such things like that. And then also restricting the overall size and how many to occur on the property. We did make reference at the end of that regarding the rentals of these, and if they are to become a rental unit, as far as not being occupied by the homeowner or the property owner, they are required to get a business registration for those. With that, be happy to answer any questions or go through each one of the line items specifically.
Okay, Alderman Alder.
Hi.
Yeah.
Page 3, I was curious about something. It says, any conditional use permit authorized should be nullified and void after 6 months. Page 3, on the very top, 2.
That's something that was already in the ordinance, and I'm not sure what that specifically is referring to. It's not something that has an impact on this conditional use that we've modified or made proposed changes. I think that's what that means if it ceased to exist. So in some of our conditional uses, a lot of times they'll refer to at the time we were doing some home-based type businesses that had a conditional use. If they dissolved that business in the home, then it would cease to exist. However, the accessory dwelling unit would always exist and remain there as a use on that property. So it wouldn't cease to exist. However, if the ownership changes, they would have to come back through and renew that condition.
And that was the question on number 3. That's what that says. So the conditional use permit follows the owner, not the building. I mean, if the owner sells his property and it has a second building on it.
Yes, it would go
then
with the
new
owner.
owner has to go through the same process and get it approved.
That's correct.
That's interesting. That seems kind of weird.
That's just the way the conditional use ordinance works. And at the time of doing the accessory dwelling units, that's the best way staff could come up with proposing for these to be approved. So they do go through a public process where the residents would be notified that, hey, this is coming along, to have a public meeting.
Because it would seem like the conditional use permit would go with the building, because the building will always be there.
Yes, possibly that may be some way of amending that, but based on the conditional use ordinance, that they do go with the ownership, the property owner.
Okay.
City Administrator Steve.
I think it's an excellent question that you raised, and I visited a little bit about it before the meeting with an audience member who may get up and talk and explain that too. I think typically when you're working with the conditional use ordinance, it probably never was anticipated that it would be applicable to this type of a situation because we've never talked about secondary dwelling units on a single parcel of property. So really, as Mr. Smith said, it was always usually maybe a business inside of a house or something. And typically, you know, then if somebody were to leave, then that business would go with them. So this is unique in that it does present a little bit of a challenge because you're really, it seems like, and I agree with you, don't know exactly the answer to fix that. But the conditional use would really be approving the second building. And once the second building is there, it's not going anywhere. So you're really saying, yes, I'm allowing the accessory dwelling unit to exist lawfully on this property, regardless of who lives there or not. What's that matter? You're allowing the second dwelling unit. So yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and I think it's something that we just had not been able to, but we never had to deal with that before.
Yes, because the building is already approved.
Yeah.
And it fits all the guidelines or it wouldn't be approved. And so the new owner has to get it all approved again.
The way that the code is written now, yes, that is oddly the way that it, unless the board changes that and figures out a way that it doesn't take that. I bet Ms. Callaway can weigh in on this a little bit more.
It was written with the intent to require any owner that was going to utilize that space for that use, a conditional use, as the example given, if a business goes into a house and receives a conditional use, they may make modifications similar to an accessory dwelling unit where that would establish an area for someone else to move in and also run a business. But those uses impact the neighbors. And so the reason to require an additional conditional use permit is to ensure not only that that notice goes out to the neighboring property owners that someone else is going to be operating this as an accessory dwelling unit, and give them a notice to come and speak towards that. It also will make the individual aware that they have to follow these ordinances.
Any other questions? Okay, Alderman Flores, I see your hand.
I was just gonna make a comment that I don't think the conditional use sunsetting whenever someone new occupies the main house, I don't think that's necessarily bad. Just to address some of the concerns we had about there being accessory dwelling units. Some of the other notes we have in this, as far as like the owner occupying the property, at least one or the other, those types of things. I think if we don't have to reissue the conditional uses, it'll be really hard to know if those rules are being abided by, or if once the dwelling unit is there, it can pretty much be used however someone wants to use it if we don't have a conditional use in place. So it might be the only mechanism we really have to keep, make sure they're not turning into something we're trying to avoid.
And to clarify that, it would they'd have to reapply if it changed ownership, not if a tenant moved out of the accessory dwelling unit and a new tenant moved in. It's the ownership of the property, not the resident that's living in one of the two structures.
Alderman Hutchinson?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, and I
Yep.
know this is a difficult subject to make it fit for every circumstance. But it seems like this is primarily written for new construction, that they're going to be adding that building as part of the new construction. And I just had a couple of questions how it would pertain in old pre-existing
Yeah,
structures. And one is that it says it will, of course, the setback requirements shall be exempt, but they shall comply with the adopted international residential building codes. Then over in K, it talks about that every year that would have to be inspected. Would that have to be in compliance with the international building codes, the inspections? And how are you going to require this to be inspected if it's a rental when you don't have rental units across the city inspected?
so the thought process to answer the first question about the existing structures, in the cases we have now, they're probably going to be a garage structure. And so they'd have to rehab that structure to bring it up to the current building codes. So that's the exemption or B on there about the existing structures. So the intent is to, they would have to actually make an application for permit, go through all the wiring, plumbing, whatever they current code. And then as far as the rental inspection, we're putting this in place to get started as a jump start on this, knowing that there is a potential of a rental inspection ordinance coming down the road.
One other
Yes,
thought.
ma'am.
Where it talks about height of the buildings. And if the building's sitting on a slope. The smaller the accessory building could possibly be, even though it looks like it's the same height as the primary building. It could be from these measurements, it could be more, it could be taller.
The way we've identified the height would be measured from the peak of the roof to the ground of that building. So say the resident primary structure is 30 feet tall, this one could not be 30, but based on topography, it could appear taller. This was just the beginning of putting some guidelines in there to keep it somewhat in control with the surrounding structures. But you are correct. I mean, if the topography, if the accessory dwelling sets on is 30 feet higher in some cases, it will appear taller than the primary structure.
And so this will be triggered by permits? Is that how it will? And will there be like ones that already exist? Will they be grandfathered in or how will that work?
So the ones that already exist, essentially, potentially they could be grandfathered in a scenario, but this would start that process. The first step would be if they want to do an accessory dwelling unit, they've got to make application for a conditional use to go through the planning and zoning and the board for approval. If that's successful, then they'd apply for a building permit just as they would a primary structure.
Thank you.
Questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Director Smith. At this time, I'd like to open up to the public. Is anyone here to speak for bill number for this? Okay. Okay, please state your name and your address, ma'am.
Jeannie McFall, 1324 East Warren Avenue, Ozark, Missouri.
Okay, thank you.
I've listened to the discussion. I know for the over 2 years you guys have discussed this, so it is a discussion that's happened and you've thought of it. But I think when I went to Washington DC for a realtor meeting, I had my eyes open to affordable housing. This is a way to get affordable housing with accessory building. I say accessory building, accessory dwellings. FHA does allow accessory dwellings in their residential loans, and they will include the income that comes in from that. And I don't know if you're aware of that, but FHA has some strict guidelines. And if they're looking at allowing this income and making it affordable for people to be homeowners, that's something that you need to consider. Because making it a conditional use, what if somebody sells that building and there's a lease on that accessory dwelling or the house, then those people will have to move. And even though it's a year lease, maybe you're going to tell them that they have to be out in 30 days because there's a new owner there and they have to apply for a new permit. So there's a lot of things I think that need to be thought about when you're making a conditional use permit that you may not have been aware of before. And I understand the neighbors should know what's going on. And the other question I had was, does it have to have separate meters or can it just have one meter? Does anybody?
It's opening.
Okay. And just remember, out in the county, they build schools under a land use permit. And then the next person didn't have a school, so there's a vacant building sitting there. So what do you do with these vacant buildings once you've paid all the money to make them livable? What's the use for that building afterwards if the neighbors don't want you to use it for that?
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is it regarding Bill 3456? Anyone here to speak against this bill? Okay. Again, board, any last minute comments for anyone regarding this? I'm not seeing any movements, therefore move that bill number 3456 would be moved to our next meeting. Okay. Now we're going to go to bill number 3457.
I'd like to make a motion to place 3457 by its first reading by title.
Okay, we have bill number 3457. Is made, motion made by Alderman Owen and a second by Alderman Snyder. All in favor, first discuss bill number 3457, do so by show of hands. And it passes. Okay.
An ordinance amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 405, article 6, landscaping, screening, and buffer yard requirements.
Okay. Welcome back. Long time no see.
Yeah, so staff has been working on an update to the landscape ordinance. It's been some time that we've been trying to work on getting this worked in. There's several changes that are being proposed, and let's just start on page 1 of the ordinance. We've noticed that the ordinance never had anything in there about a purpose. So staff has taken the time to draft kind of the purpose and the intent of our city's landscape ordinance and what we're striving for. So that's identified on page 1. On the second page, alternative landscape plans. There were always in here about the alternative landscape plans that an applicant could propose, but we rarely did see that, and it wasn't real clear on what the conditions are for them to propose that. So staff has updated the section about alternative landscaping plans for things to consider when the site may be fairly unique or not the typical development of a site. And then moving on to page 3 under item C. Maybe 3-4 years ago, staff had proposed and got approved a revision for our temporary occupancy permits. At that time, the only thing that would accommodate a temporary occupancy, and mostly this is on the residential side, we don't see it as often on the commercial, but a TCO before a current ordinance would have been allowed from the March month or November to March timeframe. So only just a limited time of the year, and is only allowed for sodding of grasses and plantings. So a few years ago, staff had seen the need for allowing TCOs year round, not just in those winter months. In addition to that, we were seeing just by the trend of the development that there were more things that need to be addressed in the field for a TCO, such as final setting of meters. There might be a busted sidewalk or curb that had to be replaced, in addition to the landscaping. Well, that was working fairly well until about a year ago when as our inspectors were going out on site, we were finding more and more things that weren't being completed, and the sites were starting to look fairly rough on the exterior of the building. So staff is proposing to modify the TCO ordinance again to only allow for the finish work of the plantings of sod lawns of grass seed and the tree planting. So we have removed the option to do any fine grading, placement of rough grading, utility structures. We're asking that those be addressed before we can issue a TCO. We are still allowing those to happen year round. The next revision on page 4, in 405-710B, we just updated a little bit of the language there just to better clarify what we're asking for. And under C, there was a reference to the interior parking 5% minimum landscaping. We are moving that to the interior parking landscaping section. Then moving on to page 5 about the covers areas of what's allowed. There's always the question about mulch. Is it wood mulch, rock mulch? What do you call it? So it made reference to mulch and bark. We have actually allowed for the stone mulch, and that's in number 3 at the top of the page. And then moving on to number 6, again, just a clarification on the ground covers. And then in 7, on the fences, we've actually added some updates here to further clarify what the fences are and where they can further find those material requirements in the other ordinance sections. Number 9, retention of protected large trees. This is a fairly large modification to the ordinance. So we have stricken through most of the language about preserving the existing trees and create a new section 405-730 about preservation of existing trees, and proposing some more requirements about a developer or a landowner or an applicant has to make a better attempt at preserving the mass tree lines that we have today. So that goes on from page 6 on into page 7, and also making reference about any excavation, they shall reach out and get a permit before they start clearing and excavating those trees. We have a section in there about tree credits. We've modified those to not give as much credit to the larger trees. There are often times when there's a case where there may be 1 or 2 trees on site that would provide enough credit to not require any additional plantings when they are needed. So we've updated that to only allow for up to 2 credits. Again, on page 8, just clarifying how the height is measured and where it's measured at. And then moving on, beginning mostly on page 10, the interior landscape, or interior parking areas, just updating some of the clarification language there on some of the height requirements or allowances of the shrubs. Again, moving on through the perimeter landscaping, again, updating some of those requirements or allowances of those landscape areas. We do make a note about waiving the perimeter landscaping when it's 2 commercial lots, for instance, abutting one another. They might share an access drive, which we encourage a lot of times to share a drive. So we've stricken or added language about we had the authority to waive that perimeter landscaping when those situations occur. And then again, we've stricken the language where it makes reference in C4. We feel that C4 will be treated similar, and we have some additional clarifications on in the ordinance. And then moving on forward and on to page 11, clarifications on the interior parking lot islands. There's always questions asked about the islands at the end of the parking lot or around the driveway, just allowing a credit for those in their calculations. And then, as I mentioned before, item H is adding that 5% minimum in there. And to be honest, I think that 5% may have been overlooked a lot of times because it was not in the section we'd generally look for the interior landscaping. And then on page 11, table 1.3, this question came up a lot. When I was a consultant, I called and had to get clarification. Everyone always misses the semicolon that was there. They assume it's 1 canopy or 1 understory ornamental evergreen tree. It's always been 1 canopy plus another tree of one of those 3 selection or options. So we just added a clarification there just to avoid any confusion and questions in the future. Moving on to page 12, again, making an update reference to the general screening sections, a revision or strike through of the language about a table reference, and then making reference to the alternative landscaping plan. And then moving on to page 13, this is where when we struck out the language about the C4, we're actually adding a section 405-775 of the core and neighborhood overlay districts landscaping requirements. Those generally would catch all the C4 areas of the downtown areas, and we make reference to that in item A. So in these areas, we do have some alternative type of landscaping requirements that would be required of an applicant. Then moving on to 13, again, making reference in the buffer yards about the alternative landscaping plan. On number 14, there's been a lot of questions in the past, and you may recall this on a few applications. When a property is vacant, zoned agriculture, the buffer yard requirements in our current ordinance treats that as like an industrial use next to a residential, and it required a substantial buffer between a vacant farm field and a residential development. So we're modifying that to note that when the property is zoned agriculture and is vacant, then that buffer yard would not be required as it is today. Moving on to 15, page 15, under our buffer yards, there's always an allowance in here in F to allow for, so a buffer yard requires plantings in a fence. F always allowed them to get if they put in a 3-foot high berm. I always struggle with that because I don't think that's comparing apples to apples. 8-foot, 6-foot high fence versus a 3-foot berm. So we're removing that requirement or allowance out of there and just sticking with the fence requirement for that immediate buffer yard effect. And then we've updated the height requirement of fencing to further coordinate with our other fencing sections so that the heights allowances are consistent. Outdoor storage on page 16. That the ordinance originally referenced the fencing material and allowances of those materials. We have removed that from the ordinance and just refer to the table that's below. So there's no conflicting information. If we ever want to update the table, we don't have to update the other language portion as well. So we've stricken out the existing table and modified and created a new table to accommodate a lot more building materials that we are seeing today that weren't identified in the ordinance previously. So on page 17 at the top, you will see that revised table to make reference to matching a building material, an architectural metal panel, composite type lumber, or vinyl fencing material in some cases. In the past, it's always been wood, slotted chain link, or just masonry. So we've kind of broaden the range of those and then allow for alternative materials. Again, moving on at the bottom of page 17, again, just clarifying and updating a reference there. And then on 18, made reference on D about utility easements. We tend to run into conflicts a lot of times when there's an existing easement or overhead power line for utilities. We're just trying to get some flexibility for the applicants to work around those. And then at the very end of this section, there was always a recommended tree species and planting species. We're just striking all of that out instead of trying to keep up with the current trends. Again, with the resolution that's passed a while back in our purpose, we do encourage native type materials or things that are more has a better success rate in our area. There are some plants in there that actually are on an invasive type list that we do not allow. So again, just instead of trying to catch every plant material there is possible, we're just striking that out and rely more on the current trends of the planting, what the nurseries have in stock. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for anyone? Alderman Hutchinson.
On page 17, first of all, I like the clarifications. It's so much easier to read now and understand. It makes sense. On page 17, though, C4 is the center city, isn't it? Primarily with the historic buildings and is that correct?
Page 17.
17 at the top where you have the table. Yeah.
Yes, C4, that's the C4 zoning, that primarily those are around the square and downtown area, but those are what we captured in the earlier section about the core overlay and the neighborhood overlay. But C4 is the commercial zoning primarily downtown.
Most historic districts don't allow vinyl. And so that's a material I'd like to see taken off of that list for the C4 district. It's just not appropriate. It's mostly they allow composite fiber to be replaced to replace vinyl as a possible use.
Keep in mind, a lot of our C4 doesn't fall in the historic overlay district as well. So like the come and go at the south side of town, that's in C4. So there's some things along that corridor that are C4 that aren't quite in the historic district. But again, if that's something you guys would want to remove, that wouldn't have any issues with it as well.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Should bend over, I guess.
What it was before you didn't mind with
In the fencing in that chart, it says vinyl is permitted in C4. And vinyl is really frowned upon in historic areas and historic districts as a material that's used for either siding or anything. Instead, what they allow is composite lumber, composite concrete siding, anything like that instead. Because it's obvious vinyl looks like vinyl and it doesn't look like wood. Thank you.
Okay, Galloway.
Cameron, if there were to be draftings where we were addressing Alderman Hutchison's concern about historic buildings, which I'm sure she doesn't have as far as the come and go, and there are other structures that are not historic there. Would you recommend drafting such that vinyl is not allowed in the historic overlay district? Or is that going to have the same problem as well?
I don't think it would initially have the same problem. I mean, honestly, I could probably stand behind either one. If it's felt better to C4 completely, that's fine. Honestly, we don't see a lot of vinyl material. But we do know it's a current product that's readily available. But if it would appease the board more of just making an asterisk note that in areas that is within the historic overlay district, then it's not allowed there. We can add an extra asterisk under that to not allow in a C4 historic overlay district to have vinyl product.
When it's time to put on new siding, you'll have to change the
Well,
material.
this is just the screening. So like a trash enclosure, dumpster screening, or if they for some reason have a buffer yard screening, it's those fence type products. It's not on the actual building material.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for anyone else? Thank you, sir.
I guess maybe at the next meeting, if there is a motion to change or something, just let me know.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, what you mentioned was an asterisk. is that something, help me out, this is new territory. Do we need to discuss that or?
If a motion is made tonight and voted on, then staff can make the amendment and bring back this bill with that amendment, which would be, as the director explained, probably an asterisk underneath the table describing the proposal. It would come back as a first reading at the next meeting, and then the second reading would follow at the subsequent meeting.
Alderman Galloway.
I would just say if that is something that you're interested in,
Yeah.
the time now would be to amend on first reading rather than let this go to second reading and then
Yeah.
put it back to first.
Okay.
Down the road.
Is that,
JR has his hand.
okay, yes, Alderman Flores,
Just to make sure I'm understanding, because this is for fencing alone and Cameron, you may know a little, Mr. Smith, you may know a little bit more about this, but isn't vinyl fencing, isn't that kind of like the white picket style fencing you see, things like that that are made out of more of a composite material versus a metal?
Yes, that is correct. It's referencing just typically you do see white, but there are other shades of colors. Generally not a dark color just because of the stability of those in the UV lights. But yes, it is the white vinyl, whether it's a privacy style panel or just the rail fencing. But again, this is really in regards to screening where you want an opaque structure. So it'd be a solid screen around a trash enclosure or a buffer yard that separates two different uses.
The reason why I was asked, the reason why I wanted to mention that is because, I'm not real familiar with a lot of different types of vinyl fencing product, but since it's not siding for the different historical buildings or things like that, I think that, we may not want to strike that out, especially for screening type fencing. That, we may want to. I just wanted to bring that up, that it had nothing to do with actually what we're putting on the buildings themselves.
And I do want to clarify, this is again, when it's for screening. So if someone just wanted to fence their yard, this doesn't apply to this scenario. They could still, like you see downtown, some of the white railing fence, that is still allowed by our fencing ordinance. This is just for screening purposes.
do we wish to act on this? I'm asking the board or just.
Make a motion to amend this to remove vinyl fencing from the C4 area. Or vinyl materials used on that screening.
Okay, there's a motion by Alderman Hutchinson. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion that we amend C4 to put an asterisk with explanation. You finish it, sir.
I think you're actually just removing the option completely. So no asterisk, just removing
sorry.
that X.
Okay, so the motion is to remove on C4, the option of vinyl. And that was made by Alderman Hutchinson, second by Alderman Alder. Okay, now help me out. This is new. Is it show of hands or roll call? Okay, thank you. Just want clarification. So all in favor of the motion, therefore reduced by show of hands? Oh,
Just have a question.
I'm sorry. Okay, so can we retract that? Okay, yes, sir.
I did have a question that you said a screening fence.
Mhm.
And you distinguish that from a fence that
It,
would be a privacy fence or.
yeah, and keep in mind it's C4, but we do allow residential in C4. So it only applies to those areas. But if someone wanted to put in just a fence around their yard in the C4 and it could be a privacy fence because we see that a lot, that doesn't apply here. This is for the screening requirements for items such as the trash enclosure that's required to be screened or a buffer yard that requires that opaque screen. It's only noted for those screening required sections. Again, not for just a perimeter fence in your yard or around your facility if it's a business.
And as amended, all C4 areas would be required to use use some material besides vinyl.
Yes.
If it's used for the limited purpose of screening.
Yes.
Thank you for answering my question, but I guess if I may just ask a question to person who's authored the amendment. If we're not limiting it to the historic areas, what do you see would be the benefit for eliminating vinyl screening? Seems kind of limited.
A screening fence is a solid wall. And even though it may be a non-contributing building, in the C4, it's either an entry into the historic district or a neighbor to the historic district, and it helps create that quality and complementariness.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize for not seeing your light. So can I start the motion over again? Okay, thank you. I was looking at our attorney. Okay, therefore, the motion that was made by Alderman Hutchinson, second by Alderman Alder, is to strike on C4, the vinyl. All in favor of that motion, do so by show of hands. Okay. Oppose? Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. Regarding Bill 3457, is there anyone here who would speak in favor for this bill? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah, you do need again, state your name and address. Thank you.
Jeannie McFall, 1324 East Warren Avenue. I know this isn't a change, but on page 17, section A1, I just had a question. When does this deed restriction get placed on the property? I know it's nothing new, but it's just, I just needed a clarification. I'm dealing with a neighboring fence that is not being maintained, so I didn't know how that was handled.
Is this something, sir, that you can speak to, Director
I
Smith?
can say that since I've been here since 2017, it's never been a deed restriction. It's always been item 2, where it's through the recording of a plat typically, and the HOA has those restrictions as well as the development. Usually number 2 is the
So I guess my question is, like the people in Bain subdivision that came into the city and they were placed a buffer restriction on them because the duplex behind them and the lot next to them, if they made any improvements, owners know that that was a restriction on that property or to change anything.
Yes, I mean, it would be to next requirements. So the homeowner would have to just make sure they get their title work, the closing company or the broker, make sure they have all those documentations. The final plat notes those requirements.
So when they came into the city, they were required to do a final plat on that one lot to connect to sewer. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think you're making reference to new things. We have a Bain Street subdivision that was developed that had a buffer yard. And that was brought in and rezoned and for a final plat. Now, if it's individual property, there's generally no buffer unless there's a residential next to a commercial. But if it's pre-existing and they're just annexing in to connect to sewer, there is no buffer yard requirements placed because they're not doing any development work.
But in this case, there was a requirement and the same thing was true with the ag land that was next to the residential. That was required to have a buffer, which I know this is being changed now, but that was required too. So would that be in a deed restriction? You might just want to look at that item there and see if it needs to stay.
Yes.
I'm kind of like Cameron. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody put that restriction on there, even though we offer it as an option. I'm sure most property owners are probably reluctant to put any type of deed restriction on their own property. So I guess it's relevant to keep in there. I'm trying to think of a,
There's no harm in being there.
yeah,
When it's developed next to agriculture, generally that's a case by case and. In that applicant, whatever side of the property they're on, will be doing the part buffer by the zoning for the Scottish, a reporter type of zoning.
Anyone here who would speak against bill number 3457? Not seeing any movement. Any last comments from any of the board members, aldermen? Not seeing any, therefore move that bill 3457 be held over at our next future meeting. We're now going to move over to bill number 3458.
Your Honor, I move that we place bill number 3458 on its first reading by title only.
And so bill number 3458 was motion made by Alderman Galloway and a second by Alderman Snyder. All in favor of this discussion, this bill, do so by show of hands. And it passes.
An ordinance reaffirming a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest in compliance with Missouri law.
I believe Alderman Galloway is going to speak on this.
Yeah. This ordinance was designed to address a specific circumstance when voting on bills. And it has come up. And when we first passed this ordinance, there was a lot of spirited debate about whether we should have this ordinance. And actually, there is scholarly work on both sides of this debate. Oddly enough, I remember when I was looking at it. So here's the issue. You have a contest. You got 3 votes on each side. You've counted your votes. The mayor, is inclined to vote against your thing. So your bill. So it's or the bill. Strike that. No, the mayor is inclined to support the bill and vote in favor of it, and you're opposed. So you counted the votes, you know how it's going to go. What do you do if you want to win? Well, you abstain. There's no tie to break. And you don't have the majority. Is that the issue that we were addressing?
Partially, and then the other mechanism that this ordinance serves to function is that every year, every 2 years, the board has to recertify the conflict of interest statute, and so that serves the purpose too.
Sure. So you have to disclose your potential conflict of interest before you abstain.
Several years ago, the city, the Board of Aldermen amended the rules of procedure, as you're describing, to require that there cannot be a strategic abstention, which is what you've described, and you have to identify the conflict of interest in order to abstain. Correct.
Okay, well, I just, maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I may have misunderstood at our agenda meeting. Was that part of this ordinance as well? Or is that a different one?
That I believe that might be a different ordinance.
I see.
This ordinance comes about under the same concept of conflict of interest that would arise when someone needs to abstain. But the laws that the city adopted in chapter 117 of our code reference the state law. And under the state law, elected officials and some of your administrative staff have to certify every 2 years conflict of interest. And you either do that through a process established in the statute, or because you adopted a code section, you can do that through an ordinance every 2 years. And so every 2 years, your city clerk brings that forward, so that way you don't have to do it on your own.
Well, then obviously I'm confused about it. So maybe you'll just explain, all we're doing is reaffirming that the state statute applies to conflicts of interest.
You're just re-adopting an ordinance that sets forth a procedure that you're going to follow as elected officials that complies with the state law and how you handle conflicts of interest. And if you don't do that, the burden shifts to you to do it on your own. And so the city staff does this so that it's taken care of for you every 2 years. And you just have to reaffirm it. It's a procedural item.
Well, forget everything I just said and listen to her.
Okay. So, okay, any questions for either our city attorney or for Alderman Galloway? Okay. I am not seeing move. Okay, anyone here from the audience regarding bill number 3458, wish to speak in favor of this? Anyone opposed or against? Okay. Again, last comment from the board. Anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing moves, therefore move that bill 3458 be held for our next meeting. We'll now move on to bill number 3459.
Your Honor, I move that we place bill number 3459 on its first reading.
Seconded by. Okay, bill number 3459 on the first reading, it was made by motion Alderman Galloway and second by Alderman Owen. All in favor of this, to discuss this bill, do so by show of hands. And it passes. Yes, ma'am.
An ordinance amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri by adopting one new section related to judicial parking spaces.
And I believe Alderman Galloway, you can speak on.
For sure. It came up within the last couple of months that although we had signage for judicial parking for the not the really old courthouse, but the old courthouse that is in use by judges, that we had no ordinance supporting that signage. The thing is, though, is we do need an ordinance for judges. And I did confer with Commissioner Jackson and Sheriff Cole and Commissioner Jackson, because we have partners in the county, and county and are affected by the amount of parking spaces available, their employees, and then the sheriff, of course, is concerned about security and parking. It was agreed that, you know, there was a need for judges to have parking close to the side door of that building. And the reason why is twofold. One is for security reasons. If they have to walk a great distance, they are dealing with that are often highly contentious. People might think of a criminal case where a family might be upset that somebody's been sentenced by the judge for a long period of time. But you might also consider that family law cases can be pretty passionate, can lead to conflict, and actually, I think, lead to more chances of violence. We're in the courthouses. Just having the judge walk a distance just creates a risk factor that you don't have to have. If they're just parked next to the side door, they can walk in. And then the other thing, the other issue about why we would single them out for special protection as opposed to other employees is administration of justice, the appearance of it. So imagine that you're on your way to court and you see the judge and you say hi, maybe exchange a few pleasantries. However, you have a case against somebody and they see you conferring with the judge and they don't know that you just said hi. You know, for the judge, it's an awkward position. I mean, they don't know whether you're a litigant or not. They might know you or might be just be friendly, but it creates an appearance which can put a risk to the administration of justice. You have a parking space by close by a side door, they avoid that risk as well. As I said, in visiting with Sheriff Cole and Commissioner Jackson, they were both in agreement that was appropriate to set out spaces for them. We limited in drafting this bill to judges that are our judges of the 38th Circuit. That means that it doesn't apply to visiting judges where those security issues are not quite as pronounced. And it'd be hard to enforce anyway. And we made it up to 3 spaces. In our ordinance, there are 2 judges that hold court there, but there are 3 courtrooms. We are a growing county. It's reasonably foreseeable that that other courtroom might fill up as they look for space, and we didn't see a reason to come back and legislate again on that issue. So that's where the and of course the judges are very interested in having this security measure passed, as you can imagine.
Any questions for Alderman Galloway regarding this? Okay, Alderman Hutchinson.
Just a question. I certainly understand the reasons to do this. I'm wondering if there's a way to limit it during hours when they would be there? Or does it need to be 24/7, given our limited parking area? And Saturday celebrations and things like that. I just didn't know if it does need to be 24/7.
Well, I don't know that it does or does not. If they have trials that sometimes will last where the jury's out and it might be midnight or 1 o'clock, that does happen. I guess I can see that. I hadn't really thought it through, but that would be the situation where those issues would still apply.
Alderman Alder.
What about saying Monday through Friday? Court is never in session on Saturday and Sunday, isn't it?
That's a good question. I don't. If there's anything in the laws that prevent court from being certainly never attended court on a Saturday, and I'm a trial lawyer.
Definitely not on Sunday.
I don't know if they have to come in and sign warrants or things like that. And
Would it be worth investigating? Maybe that would be an easier thing to vote on this if we say Monday through Fridays or what court is in session, but you couldn't say when court is in session. Maybe Monday through Friday, because that'll free up those parking spaces on the weekend.
well, I guess my thinking is the weekends, the parking is not so much the issue, it's the weekdays. There's hardly anybody there.
That's what happened today.
Well, that's true, but then if judges are rarely there, I mean, they're not gonna leave their house just to come to the courthouse and kick up their heels.
No, but I mean, another person could park there during the event. If it said.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Monday through Friday.
Can we ask Lieutenant Dorcher? Does that ever happen on Saturday where a judge has to come in to sign?
It could.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
They have traditionally parked there. You can see it's the same cars all the time since I've been there. And I still office catty corner from them, so and live there. So I've seen them. I don't know that, I mean, where those remarks come from, but I've not seen it be an issue since I've worked and lived on the square, if that helps.
Okay. Alderman Hutchinson.
I would not have thought of that myself. But the only reason I did was it was pointed out to me on a couple of different occasions when there were special events that it was so packed and people were having a hard time finding anywhere to park. And those 2 spaces were just sitting empty in the middle of it all. But if it's necessary for their safety, I do understand, and I'll pass that on.
And yeah, I don't think it's a frivolous point that's made. I will clarify, it's 2 spaces only. It will only be 3 if there's another judge that's added to the present roster of judges and they are having their court in that particular building.
But this bill is approving three, so we'll have to come back again. Correct? But-
Sorry.
But as for this bill, we're approving three, but,
So,
but
yeah.
currently there'll be two that will be used.
Two will just be used and it'll be three only if we get those two those two circumstances occur.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Would it be better just to do the two now? You could always come back and add a third one. Because you'd have one space empty all the time, and that would kind of maybe have a negative effect.
No, you wouldn't have one space empty. It wouldn't be signed. There'd be no signs. It'd just be signed for two. Yeah,
just doing two
we're just doing two signs now.
now.
If they appoint a judge to the 38th Circuit and that judge is assigned that building in addition to the other two, you won't have to come back before the Board of Aldermen and put in another request for a slot. It'll just be there and staff can just add it at that point.
I see, but people will park there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
They would only see two
Yeah.
marked off areas.
Correct. I mean, we are approving three spots, but since there's only two judges, only two spots at this time will be taken. And so if the third judge is appointed down the road, we don't have to come back, create a new bill. It's already been approved by us, if that's the direction y'all go. Okay. Any more questions for Alderman Galloway? Okay, again, this is a first reading, open to the public. Anyone here to speak in favor of this? Bill number 3459? Or against? Okay, any further comments from the board? If not, then I move that this bill be held over to the next meeting, bill number 3459. Now we're going to be moving to resolutions. We have two of those. I want a point of clarification before we go into this. After we go through as approving, discuss it and all, then we do approve these tonight or not,
Correct, yes.
by show of hands or roll call.
So,
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, resolution 1986.
We can make a motion to place resolution number 1986 for first reading by title.
And seconded by,
second.
okay. So a resolution 1986, motion by Alderman Owen and second by Alderman Alder. All in favor to discuss this motion, do so by show of hand. And it passes.
A resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Ozark, Missouri, approving one reappointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This resolution reappoints Francisco Wim Oaks.
Okay, staff comment, Director Cameron Smith, you have any comments? Okay, do you have any questions? From the board? Yes, Alderman.
Yeah, just, can you tell us about this person?
He is a current P and Z commissioner at this time. It's just his terms expired, so he's getting reappointed. So in both cases, they're existing commissioners.
Any other questions from the board?
Happy with
Yes.
Okay. Is this a public meeting? Okay. Anyone here from the public to speak for this resolution? No movement, anyone against? Okay. So again, last comment, any question from the board? Okay. Therefore, I move,
Like I made the motion to adopt resolution number 1986.
second by,
Second.
okay. Okay. The motion is that resolution 1986 be adopted. The motion made by Alderman Owen and seconded by Alderman Alder. All in favor of adopting resolution 1986, do so by show of hands. And it passes. Okay, now we'll move on now to resolution 1987.
Make a motion to replace resolution number 1987 on its first reading by title and description.
And seconded by,
Second.
okay, Hutchison. Okay, so resolution 1987, motion made by Alderman Owen and seconded by Alderman Hutchison to discuss. All in favor of this motion, do so by show of hands. and it passes.
A resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Ozark, Missouri, approving one reappointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This resolution reappoints Adam Brown.
Okay, any staff comments from Director Smith?
Questions on the last one, I guess I'll. Mr. Brown was a recent addition to our commission that was filling a term that was about to expire. So he only had a couple months before his term was getting renewed. Been a great addition to the commission and is really digging in, asking a lot of questions and questioning some things as well. So yeah, it's great to have him on the commission and glad to have him reappointed.
Any questions for Director Smith? Okay. Not seeing anyone from the public here to speak in favor of this resolution 1987. And opposed? Not seeing any. And again, board, any final comments? Okay, if not,
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 1987, number 1987.
second by,
Second.
okay. So the motion to adopt resolution 1987 made by Alderman Owen, second by Alder, all in favor, do so by show of hands. And it passes. There are no second readings of final bills for tonight. This time we'll go to City Administrator Steve Childers.
Mr. Mayor, there are a lot of great people that work at the city, and I think it's important sometimes to time to time to recognize them. And everybody works really hard, and they do a lot of good things. And I just put a quick list together to just bring a few of those to your attention. I think it's important, and I'll keep doing this as our employees hit their milestones, goals, objectives, things like that. So just to point out a few, I just want to remind everybody, and you may already know some of these, maybe you don't. Our city clerk was once again, she achieved her International Institute of Municipal Clerks certification. I think that's pretty cool. Congratulations on that. We always, and I always encourage my department heads to, if they can, and they do have the time, to serve on boards within their community, boards that maybe are even in our community or in our region. Our HR director, Mike Hunter, was recently appointed to the board of directors of the Development Center of the Ozarks. That's a very important organization, and I think that just shows the larger community that the city of Ozark cares and that we're listening. Anyway, you probably heard also of what we used to call a CAFR. Well, now it's called I don't even know how to say this. ACFR, I guess. That is our in our finance department. I don't see Mary here, but for the third consecutive year, we were awarded the recognition that the CAFR was accepted and won the award. So that's really an amazing thing. That is a 10-year outlook of the city of Ozark and the history of our finances. It probably sounds like a boring document, but if anybody wanted to know more about the city of Ozark and what we've done and how we've gotten there, well, the CAFR is a good place to start. Anyway, I'm real proud of our finance director for that and their department. We've also completed another annual audit that will be presented to you at sometime coming up soon when we receive that actual report back. But special thanks to finance director and her team, Sarah Phillips, Tracy Hassler, Ronna Hicklin, and the newest member of the team, Megan Walker. Don't know if you knew we had a new member to the team, but we do. Her name is Megan Walker, and she's in our finance department. Didn't know he wasn't going to be here tonight, but the chief has a fill-in back there. Thank you very much for doing that. You probably remember that the chief was recognized in 2022 by the International Association of the Chiefs of Police.
Yes.
For 40 under 40. That's a big deal. I mean, that's an international award. But just recently, what you might not know is that he was chosen by a group of his peers to take part and complete the FBI commander course. That isn't something that everyone gets invited to do.
Yeah.
That's a very prestigious request. I think you probably know that. I think it's amazing that we have a chief of police that's completed that course, and I'll probably bring this up next time when he is here in the room so I can say good job to him, but he had his last baseball game tonight, so I understand. And we did have Lieutenant Jared Dry just completed his master's degree. I think that's a big deal. Few years ago, it was very important. I think anytime that you can help your employees achieve a higher level of education that benefits your organization, I think that's a good thing. So we put in a tuition reimbursement program here at the city of Ozark. We've had several of our employees utilize that and achieve a higher level of education. And in this case, it's a master's degree. So I'm really proud of that program. I think it's well utilized and I think it benefits our organization well. Also want to mention that Samantha Payne, and I don't remember if I mentioned this, maybe I haven't, I don't know. But Sam completed the Deputy City Administrator's ICMA Academy. That was something that was important. That's not exactly a totally fun thing to go through, but it's one of those academies that you do it online and you get through it, and that was a good thing. And also has been invited to speak this year at the Missouri Municipal League and is doing that in conjunction with the city of Raymore. So that is going to be a neat thing, and we're well presented at the MML. And last but not least, I do want to make note that you probably remember purchasing a large truck called the vacuum truck. Well, if you haven't seen the vacuum truck around, you might notice that there's some pretty nifty stickers on the side of that truck. And that's because Tim Octon, one of our members over in the Public Works Department, who's been there for over 25 years, worked with the 5th grade student body on an art that allowed for them to put their on the sweeper truck. And now when it goes through the kids know whose that is, and they're awful proud of that. And that was online in our newsletter. So just a few fun things and some things I'm awful proud of the staff about. I don't brag on them enough, and I'm going to do that more. So, and that's my report. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Is Sam talking in September? Is that when it is?
I think it is in September. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I was kind of thinking of going to that.
Yeah.
And Mary Edna's back now, but
She is. I recognized again, once again, 3rd consecutive year for the CAFR or ACFR, or if I'm saying that right. So congratulations on that, and so forth.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Administrator Steve Childers? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Director Smith, who's not been up enough tonight.
Just a couple quick updates. The Sonic on the north side of town, their permit has been approved, so hopefully you'll see some work underway soon. Hugh and Magoo's, you may have noticed they're starting to do some framing on the roof structure of that building to kind of give it that revamp or facelift to make it look like they're a prototype. There was some questions about the Purple Panda. They did not close. They temporarily took the signs down for re-roofing in that building. I think it caused some confusion to the citizens, but if you notice today, the signs are back up. So they are, I'm not sure when they will reopen. I think they're temporarily.
No, they're open. I was there Friday talking to them. They
Okay.
did shut down temporarily because the wife had a heart attack,
Okay.
but they're back. She's working part-time now.
So no, they are going to stay in business. And then just an update, we are currently actively still working on trying to fill the code compliance officer position. We've had a few applicants. We've shortlisted about 5 to try to get some interviews. We just have not been successful yet on selecting someone, as we're still working through those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
what is 5 Below?
It's going in the shopping center, just to the west side of Salvatore's, that strip mall there, east of Walmart. It's kind of like there's one up by Best Buy in Springfield. It's like I want to say like a knickknack store or like a little trinket store, $5 and below kind of scenario. Like dollar store, maybe another.
It's just
My kids love it. I go there all the time. It's
Yeah.
candy,
Oh, wow.
toys, you name it.
I think it's geared
So
to the kids.
$5 and below.
Right.
Yeah, my kids,
Yeah.
I go there all the time.
My girls love it too. So
My kids are going nuts already. Yeah. You
Mine
go to
about-
5 Below far too much, don't you? Yeah, you know.
It's up about $50.
Yeah. You don't ever leave for 5 Below, I can tell you that. Yeah. So,
And Oak Pond, we have a pawn shop?
Yeah, pawn shop.
Is that the only one we've got? Is that first one, only one? Or have we had?
There's one. There's Doc Holidays. It's up east of Farm and Home in that strip center there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that shopping center.
So this will be a second,
This will be a second one, yeah.
and James River Road that's up by me?
Um,
No,
yes, I don't know exactly which road, where that is. It's, I think a block south of CC. I think it's in that area there. Can't picture it in my head at the moment, but yeah, up in that area, James River Road.
by Brahms?
Yes, that loop, then that
Ah.
comes out by, thank you. I think that's it, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, ma'am.
One more, what's been digging?
Oh, I figured someone to ask about that.
I've been there.
Yeah, not sure the best way to describe it, but I've been to one. It's like I want to say like an Amazon type return
Yeah.
store in. Like the first day they get a shipment, it
Yes.
may be everything $15.
Yes.
The next day, like $10, $8, and it just whittles down to $1 a day or $1 a product. And then I think they're probably closed one day for restock.
And be stocked.
Starts all over again.
But the store has tables, there's boxes. You have to dig through the box.
Yeah.
That's why it's called then digging.
Yeah.
You have to dig through and find the items. And sometimes they're not, the container may be not in great shape, but suppose I'm supposed to be okay. But anyway, I went to meet the owner and everything, but when you're OCD, that bothers you. Because it's not on shelves, nice and organized.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Director Sam?
Do you guys have any questions? I added a section, I believe at the end. That I hadn't added before, maintenance items, and that's just as a reminder of the things that we have going on. With the gym pool, with the gym closed and the indoor pool. We started all of our summer classes and my goodness, you guys, it's so busy. It's just really busy at the OC. We also had this Saturday night, Moana is going to be down in the park. The actual Moana herself before the movie Moana. So people are pretty excited about that. So if you have any questions? No. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay. At this time, we're item 10, but I don't have any comments and all, but we do have to go to a closed session. So can we have a motion that we would do that?
So
Okay, and seconded by, okay, motion that we go into closed session made by Alderman Galloway, second by Alderman Alder. At this time, it's by roll call.
Alderman Alder.
Aye.
Alderman Flores.
Aye.
Six ayes, motion carries.
Okay, we'll go in closed session.
Move to adjourn.
Second, okay, there's motion to adjourn, all in favor, by show of hands. All opposed, likewise, carried.